So let's start our conversation about digital security. I'm really excited to introduce you to our amazing expert today, Joe Williams. Joe Williams is the Senior Director of Information Technology at AOF, where he leads IT initiatives that drive secure, efficient technology solutions for a mission-driven organization supporting small business growth. With over 25 years of experience in the IT and financial industries, Joe has held executive roles in IT leadership, specializing in digital security, systems optimization, and data protection. His expertise spans both corporate and nonprofit sectors, providing him with a unique perspective on the challenges and opportunities in digital transformation and cybersecurity. As a graduate of Houston's High School for the Performing and Visual Arts and Morehouse College, Joe's educational journey reflects a commitment to continuous learning and a passion for empowering his teams and community through technology. Known for his practical approach to IT security and strong advocacy for user education, Joe plays an active role in fostering a culture of cybersecurity awareness at AOF, which I can attest to because Joe is our fearless IT leader. And he emphasizes the straightforward, actionable practices that make a real difference for small businesses and their customers. It's great to have you here, Joe.
Wow, I want to meet that guy.
I know. I love hearing the wealth of experience you have, and we truly have just the perfect person to take us through something like digital security, which can feel kind of hefty. So, Joe, I want to jump into it by asking you, with so many businesses that are being targeted by cyber attacks, what would you say is the most pressing digital security concern they should be aware of?
Wow, that's a great question, Brittany, and I'm sure that that is one that is top of mind for many of our small business owners here on the call today. Um, One of the most pressing digital security concerns today, I would say, is phishing. It sounds simple, but phishing attacks have become increasingly sophisticated. Like considering the rise of AI, I used to say AI was coming, but AI is already here and it's being leveraged for good and bad. And phishing is definitely one of the avenues of bad that wonderful coming technology is being leveraged for. These phishing attacks often target small businesses that may not have extensive cybersecurity defenses in place. It's just not in the budget, or the expertise is not on hand to implement and manage them effectively. These attacks, unfortunately, do and are successful in tricking employees to clicking on malicious links or providing sensitive information. And this, of course, can lead to data breaches, financial loss, damage to your business's reputation. It's essential. It's critical for small businesses to recognize this risk and to take proactive steps to educate their teams on how to identify and avoid phishing threats. Couple things or a few things, when you get an email and it's asking for things, you should look at the email address that message is coming from. Maybe you're getting an email and it says it's from PayPal, and you look at the email address and it's Brittany at PayPal dash users, and it should just be PayPal.com. So that should be number one eyebrow to be raised. If they're reaching out to you and they're using like a generic greeting like dear customer or dear you or something of that nature, really with the wealth of information that most of our businesses that we interact with that they should at least be able to speak to your name. One of the other telltale signs is that the messaging expresses a deep sense of urgency or threatening language, maybe telling you that, hey, I need you to respond to this immediately. Click on this link right now. Your account will be frozen. Or maybe they're posing to be a family member that is in dire need. All of these different types of things is that you should definitely be looking for. Some of the things it is that AI has helped to reduce Phishing attempts used to be easily identified just by the amount of grammar and spelling mistakes that you could catch. Like you see basic words misspelled or very poor grammar, missed punctuations, and things of that nature. Those are all telltale signs that that message that you're receiving is a phishing attack. Um, there are many others, and of course, we will be sharing some additional information following this with some education that you can have, not just for yourselves, but for those that are working for you to help you make sure that everyone's familiarized with some things that they can do to protect themselves from that. I hope I did not ramble too long, Brittany. Will me
Not at
in, but
all.
there's definitely a lot of information out there that we're trying to get shared with everyone.
Yeah, this is really important. I think especially what you mentioned about how AI can be leveraged for good, but also for bad. And so having like an even more specific eye out for those things that just don't seem quite right. And we got a question in the chat that I want to go ahead and ask now because it seems very relevant. So does the risk when it comes to phishing, does it occur when you click on an item, or can you be at risk by downloading things like even if you haven't opened something?
Sadly, the answer would be D, all of the above.
Oh,
Some messages do have the potential of, we call them zero threat. So just the fact that it downloaded into your Outlook presents the opportunity that some malicious code could be injected into your system. Mostly, though, the threat is or the threat is actually taken advantage of or exercised by you clicking on a link or responding to the email. One of the real basic things, you might be annoyed by a phishing attempt or by a spam message, and you're replying back and you're telling them, hey, stop sending me these messages. Really, what you're telling them is that, hey, you got one. It's a valid email address. And then sometimes, if you're not careful, maybe you have a signature line that has your phone number and your address and things of that nature. They're collecting all of that information to then really focus in their future attacks. Or maybe they'll use your contact information to mimic you when they try to send a phishing attack to maybe someone that you're connected with or that you do business with. So don't respond to the email. Do not respond. And if there are links in the messages, that's definitely one thing you should look for as well, is if there are links in the messages, hover over the links and you can see if it's not paypal.com, maybe you'll see it's some language in there or some other words that make it very clear that you're not conducting business with PayPal. That should be very clear just by seeing the URL that you'll get displayed to you by just hovering over the link.
yeah, that is really helpful too, because it can feel overwhelming. It's like, well, if I just get an email and then I have no control, but it really is being kind of diligent, keeping your eyes on it, and don't click on anything, take your time. So that makes me feel like, okay, we have a little bit of control, we have a little bit of power. Um,
And I'll add even like, so especially for small businesses where you may not have a full, IT operations and mail experts and things, they're available to you. A lot of the email providers like Google and the such, or even Microsoft, if you're using Microsoft tools, they will have an option when you open the email that you can click a button within your email service to report that message. It's like we'll likely just say report. And basically that sends the header information or details about that message to the security team at Google or at Microsoft. And then they are able to then take information about that, and then they can help protect not only you going forward, but maybe others that particular hacker may be trying to send messages to. So that clicking that button will actually remove it from your inbox. It should block it from additional messages coming as well, but just do not click on any of the links in the message.
Got it. So using those like internal verified situations within your email and Gmail, Outlook, whatever you have to report it. can really like take it away. So you don't have to worry about it. They'll handle it.
Absolutely. And when in doubt, just make sure you delete and clear your deleted items folder.
Okay, we got it. I'm learning so much, Joe. I feel like I'm gonna have a little checklist after we leave today.
All right. Well,
I love it.
there's a spot for you on the IT and security team. I'll get you ready.
I love it. Okay, so I want to ask you about, could you walk us through some of the most common cyber threats like small businesses face, just so we can be aware?
Again, I have to start with phishing attacks. As mentioned, you guys are probably like, stop talking about fish, or maybe you're getting hungry and want some catfish or something. But as I mentioned, phishing attempts are attempts to trick individuals into sharing sensitive information. So that's what they're trying to do. They're just trying to collect data. They're trying to get access to things or drop something into your corporate or your business's environment. Um, Linked with phishing attempts would be ransomware and malware. That's another avenue for malware and ransomware to get injected into your systems. This involves software that locks down data or locks down your system all entirely until a ransom is effectively paid. For small businesses, I know this can be devastating. So you click on a link that you thought was just innocent, maybe you thought you're going to see some pictures of your grandkids or whatever, and next thing you know, you get a screen on your computer that lets you know, hey, call this number because we've locked down your system and we're holding it ransom. Please don't, please, I hope that does not happen to anyone here on this call. And then, of course, the next that I would add would likely be uh, data breaches in general. And that's when unauthorized individuals gain access to your sensitive information or sensitive information that belongs to your company, which is basically your customer database, so to speak, and that potentially being exposed. So that someone got into your network or into your systems and they were able to get access to see, copy, download, export that data, or maybe you were sharing that information in an unsecure manner. It wasn't encrypted, and so someone else was able to get a copy of that data. Those are all defined as data breaches. So my top three, if that's the question, is phishing attacks, ransomware and malware, and data breaches. Those should be like if you're bringing in any resource to assist with your protecting your digital cyber operations, those would all have to be addressed in any plans that are coming your way.
Yeah, that makes sense. So having an eye out for those three. And they all sound very scary and kind of connected a little bit. It sounds like you could click on something and accidentally download some of these things. So being really diligent sounds important. And I see there's some questions in the chat. That's great. We have a live Q&A at the end. So we will definitely get to those. So please continue to drop those in the chat. So Joe, do you have like a real life example where a small business was impacted by a cyber attack? And like, what do you think we can learn from cases like this?
There are so many, and I'm sure you've seen in the news about the big companies. I'm trying not to throw any names out there, but big box retailers, banks have found themselves even with all their layers and levels of security. So it really is important that we keep this top of mind. Many cases, I can think of one small retail business. I'm sorry for the small retail businesses that might be on this call, but they unfortunately did fall victim to a ransomware attack. And sadly, they had no backup of their data, so they weren't making sure that they had a routine backup, so they had a copy to restore back to should something like this happen. So when the attackers encrypted their data files or all their files, they were forced with left without an option. They had to pay a pretty hefty fine to be given the keys to regain access to their systems. Of course, you would say the lesson to be learned here is the importance of regular data backups and making sure that you do have a plan in place for how you would recover from some form of a disaster. Hopefully, it's not falling victim to a ransomware attempt. But simple steps like this can make such a significant difference in mitigating damage from an attack.
Yeah, I like that you can, obviously be diligent and try to like avoid this at every single step, but also have that plan. So when it does happen, you're like, okay, I have prepared for the worst. Hopefully we never need it, but I prepared for it. So because yeah, otherwise, what would I do? I would just, I mean, I personally would probably cry, but everyone's on their own journey. So no, that is
I
super
will tell
helpful.
you that even with a wonderful plan in place, I have found myself ready to shed a tear. But fortunately, we had plans in place. But they can be very scary, very emotional. It's like having your house broken into. It really does shake to the core of who you are. If you like, it's compromising in such a way that it's like we said before, use those powers for good, people. But unfortunately, we know that they all do not.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's important to just keep those things in mind, and that is really helpful. Okay, so a lot of our people on this call today, they're business owners. So, a big part of doing business is making money, and we hope everyone here makes lots of it. So, what are some practical steps when it comes to securing like online transactions? Because that's a lot of what our businesses are doing.
Wow. So fortunately, there are so many out of the box solutions that can help make sure that before you go into any type of retail or money transactions online, that you're not trying to even, I don't even know if it's going to be possible, but you're not even trying to facilitate any of those transactions on your own without going with a true, secure, trusted partner. So you Number one would be to make sure that your transactions on your online transactions are secure. You should have a secure payment gateway. A couple that come to mind are Square.com or Stripe, are companies that do offer payment solutions for you. You know, they may get a bit off of the interchange for the transactions that are being processed, but one thing you know for sure that you're paying for is yours and your customers' security when they're conducting business with you. Also, making sure that when you stand up a website, that you go through the extra step with your website host, like if it's GoDaddy.com, and that you get an SSL certificate, secure socket layer. It's a certificate. You pay a little extra, and it renews on a recurring basis. Maybe you renew it every year or every couple of years. It's not extremely technical, but it is an added layer of security that would be placed on your website. And what it does is it encrypts the data that your customers exchange with you on your website. So maybe there's a form that they're a contact form. So long as they're at your website, you'll notice it. If you don't have an SSL certificate, or if you're interacting with a company that does not have an SSL certificate on their website, if you look at your browser window, it'll say http:// and then www dot. If it does have an SSL certificate, typically it will say HTTPS. That S is your secure indicator. And there will also be other notices that can be found on the website as well, that will allow your customers to know that your website does have that extra layer of security on it. Um, Another thing that you can do is make sure that your financial transactions, or anything that has to do with accessing your payment systems, that multi-factor authentication is enabled. So when you and or your employees are maybe logging into Stripe or to Square to look at your transactions, that you and your employees have to use multi-factor authentication to even get access to that. When you're logging into your bank, most banks, it's not optional anymore, but some are still a little behind the curve to where they don't yet have full multi-factor authentication. You should definitely be pressing for that. Can be a little annoying, but that little bit of annoying to go through that extra step is really there for your security. So after you enter your username and your password, you should be prompted that maybe you'll get a follow-up text message with a code that authenticates that the number that they already have on file for you. That's a way for them to make sure that your password hadn't been compromised and someone's not just trying to log on in with it. So they need that extra bit of authentication to make sure that who's trying to access your financial systems is actually you are authorized to do so. All in all, these are just a few steps that you can be mindful of to help try to maintain a secure environment for your customers and to also to build their trust.
Yeah, I like that there was different layers to that. Obviously, you want to make sure that payment information is secure, not only for yourself, so you can keep your funds, but also so your customers continue to know it is safe to shop with you. And I loved learning about the different easy ways to pick up on if a site is secure, because I might not have known that as a customer, but I definitely know when I get on a website that isn't. Like there's like an X at the top. Like there's some stuff that just makes you look at it a little different, which gives you pause before you put your credit card in there. So I think that was really helpful. And I I see Emma is dropping in some extra articles in case folks want to dig in a little deeper to SSL or multi-factor authentication, which I know we'll talk a little bit more about. But okay.
If you
Oh, yes.
don't mind, I will
Yes,
just add,
please.
you did mention something about going to a website and you see the X that's saying that it's not secure or there's a question mark around it. That is I think that is very important then for businesses to also make sure that, yes, you got that SSL certificate, but it's important that you renew it. Because once that SSL certificate becomes expired, that expiration notice or that it expired also becomes visible on your website that you had a certificate, but now it's expired. So you would see that little red X, or your customers would be warned that the certificate has expired when they're accessing your website. So it should all be automated. So if you put your corporate card in there when you started and make sure that you're letting it renew, you should get email notifications and all that. So the process for keeping it current should definitely be something it is that you keep on your to-do list of things that you're needing to check to make sure of.
Yeah, so you keep that going because as a consumer, we may not know what that means, but if anything looks a little, interesting, it may just be enough to leave that site. That's super helpful. I want to ask you about customer data because I feel like, and I've seen some questions about folks they are storing some kind of customer data. Um, and what are some of the best practices businesses can implement when it comes to protecting that data?
Wow. So I will share. The bulk of my experience has been working in the financial industry. So protecting customer data was always top of mind. The most critical task it is that we had was making sure that our customers' data was kept secure. Fortunately, and I did a little bit of digging in preparation for this webinar, and I did find that the NIST does have a specific section on their website where they are offering some best practices or are protecting customer data guidance for specifically for small businesses. And it includes like a few quick wins that could include ensuring data is stored securely, limiting who has access to that data and making sure that it's on a need to know basis or need to have access to it. So the person that is maybe coming in to sweep up the shop doesn't need to have the key to the door where your main server might be stored. Maybe you will just leave that room unswept until someone with with the appropriate level of access to be able to go in and take care of that closet. That was a horrible example. So I prepared about NST, but I did not prepare for examples.
You know what? It
Um,
makes sense though. Who needs to be there? It's the equivalent of who is all going to be there and who needs to be there.
Right. But then like, and also you can use encryption. Encryption is just another critical piece of your security toolkit. And that's to make sure that if someone does get access to the data, that they're unable to do anything with it because it's encrypted. So protect the data. We say at rest and in transit. Maybe that's a little, like what does that mean? But if the data is sitting like on a computer or on a server, the data needs to be encrypted. If I am sending data between two systems, that data needs to be encrypted on the sending end, then can be decrypted on the receiving end, only to be encrypted again. That's just to make sure that no one's in between and able to capture that unencrypted data and then have your data fully exposed. Um, you can also implement things like having a practice or a procedure around having regular audits, go in and inspect what you expect, and just make sure that you're going in and you're able to see and confirm that the data was accessed or who accessed, or just making sure that you have some practices to make sure that you are watching what's going on within your business as it relates to your customers' data. And then as things come up, make sure that you're addressing them. So make note of them and then put in a plan to, I say, mitigate any vulnerabilities or things it is that you found, or maybe you do put an extra or a different lock on the closet with the sensitive computer, to where then the person that does come in and sweep every day, that does need a master key, they can get into every room except for the one that has your sensitive data and take care of that. That's a very simple um, example, maybe bad example, but very simple measure it is that you can take. So, and I think that's just an example, um, uh, because a lot of our data may be in the cloud. And so then we're talking about how you are provisioning access to your systems to make sure that everyone doesn't necessarily have access to the full data, but they can only access the functions it is they need to do to keep your business moving, but not to data that they don't need, or that's not important to their job.
That is really helpful. It makes me think back on different roles where there might be sensitive information and it would just look like X's to me if I was logging in. So, and then for us who, because encrypted, decrypted, it's very fancy. And so I'm just curious, what does that look like? What is encrypted in like a normal everyday? How would someone do that?
Wow. So fortunately, you should not have to manually apply an encryption method to your data. Most systems will come with the ability for you to encrypt. It is likely going to come as an option. Like, do you want the data encrypted? If any of you are, using like a SQL database to house your sensitive data, there are options within SQL to where you can implement encryption. Maybe you are using a CRM like Salesforce. Salesforce has options to where then you can implement encryption on your data. Um, uh, they have some add-ons to it that allows specific field levels to do exactly what you just mentioned, Brittany, to where maybe you do have a customer database, but you want to protect people's social security numbers. So when Brittany goes to pull up Joe Williams's account record, it has all my data, but then the field that shows my social security number is just masked and it's not visible to me. So there's encryption, and then there's also limiting who has access to what. So it's like, I'm sorry, I will go back to encryption. Encryption, the data is still there. It's just there is an algorithm that gets applied to it that jumbles it all up. And the only way that it can be decrypted is with that magic decoder ring. Sorry, is with your decryption key, right? So yeah, we won't try to go into the science of encryption and decryption, but please look into it and leverage it for your data. That is absolutely one way for you to make sure that even if someone is looking at anything on your network, hopefully that's not ever taken place, but if they get to that sensitive space without having your decryption keys, that data is just ones and zeros and not legible for them.
Yeah, that is really helpful to know too, that it'll be built into the systems and it's something we can just kind of opt into, and it's not something like should I be doing this individually? So that's
Right.
helpful. Okay, passwords. I feel like this is the big one. Everything has a password, and password policies, they can be really tough. for organizations, especially smaller organizations, to enforce. So, what are some tips do you have for managing those strong passwords?
I like to use post-it notes and write them down and paste them up on my monitor.
Perfect. Then, no, I'm kidding.
Please don't do that. Seriously though, a practical approach would be to use a password manager. Um, uh, there are password managers like LastPass or 1Password that can be used to help generate as well as store those sensitive passwords for you. So it'll create a nice complex password for you that then you could go ahead and create that account, leverage that password, and keep it stored away safe in your password manager. Um, Encourage your employees to use passphrases instead of just traditional passwords. Maybe make a sentence and then go through that sentence that you can remember. I'm trying to think of one without exposing a password I might have used. But I like to walk the dogs, and you go through and you write that out, and then you replace some of the characters with special symbols and some of the characters with numbers and maybe put in an underscore and things of that nature, just to where you can remember what it is. And then it's just a matter of you remembering how to replace the letters with your special characters or your up and lower cases, things of that nature. So it helps you do that as opposed to writing it down on a post-it note and sticking it to your monitor. Um, uh, uh, Also enforce regular password updates. Some systems you can actually set them up, and it would force the users every 6 months or every 30 months, once every 12 months, whatever it would prompt you like, hey, this password is due to expire, so you need to create a new password, and then have rules set that you can't use the same password that you used the last time you changed your password, just to make sure that those passwords are fresh because unfortunately, there are tools you might see if you use like a Google account or something of that nature. You might get a warning that, hey, your password has been found on the dark web. Consider changing it. That does happen. So passwords get associated with your email address. And so they know you work for this place, and then they can potentially try to use that password they found on the dark web to gain access into some of your systems. So if you're sharing passwords amongst different logins, that's absolutely one thing it is that you should do immediately. Now is start planning to make sure that each of your sensitive accounts have different passwords. Because once it's compromised, it can be associated with your email address. And unfortunately, most systems allow you to log into them with your email address as your account. So if they've already figured out your password for one account you're logging into and it's associated with your email, then they just go to other sites and they use that same combination of that same email address and the email that they've already found and got compromised. And then they can get into multiple of your accounts with that, especially if you don't have multi-factor authentication enabled for those accounts access.
Yeah, that's kind of like the extra security. And I like that you said that's one thing that, you should do today if you're on this call, because one thing is that is free, right? You can go into your different systems, you can change that password, and that is already going to make you more secure tomorrow than you were today. So I love that.
Absolutely. Yes.
Okay, I feel like I could make a list of Joe's favorite IT things, and one of them would be two-factor authentication after this thing. And I know we talked about this a little bit, and we kind of talked about even more like how it can help you, but just want to talk a little more about why is it becoming essential for small businesses to kind of like turn this 2FA on?
Um, let's just So two-factor authentication or 2FA. I said MFA earlier, and 2FA is becoming the more, I guess, relevant term because that's really what's happening is usually a combination of a password and something else before your access is granted. It's effectively a security measure that requires two forms of verification before granting you access into said system. For example, after you enter that wonderful new password that you have that's different from any of your other passwords. Once you enter that password, then you're going to get a code sent to your phone, and then you have to enter that code that was sent to your phone into the next prompt before you're able to get in. Or maybe there's a push verification to an app, and you just say, yes, it was me. And then that gives the system the okay to finally let you in. 2FA adds an extra layer of protection, which is essential because it can prevent unauthorized access when just that one password that you were using for all your accounts does get compromised. It's relatively easy to enable and is increasingly being seen as a necessity for any business handling sensitive data. So if you don't want others to get access to your account, this is absolutely one way that you should be leveraging, or one thing you should be leveraging to make sure that your data, your customers' data, your business's data, and accounts are secure is 2FA.
That makes so much sense. And I know that it's everywhere. And most time it'll just be a question like, do you want to enable this? Like it's already built in. And so that's another really easy thing that you can just say, yeah, why not? Why not?
And
Um,
so that is definitely one that happens is the do you want to enable it? It's like, oh, but I'm in such a hurry. I just want to go and log in and take care of it, and maybe I'll enable it later. Stop delaying that wonderful extra layer of protection. Fortunately, more and more financial institutions are not giving you the option. It is a requirement. And actually, I I would raise an eyebrow to any financial institution that you are engaging with that does not have two FA as a part of their access to their system. So not trying to suggest that everybody go off and change your banks, but if you're logging into your banks or you're checking your credit card and there is no 2FA and you have a simple password to get access to it, you should be raising an eyebrow or checking to them to confirm that they do have MFA. And maybe you said, I don't want to enable it, but they do have it, but they allowed you to forego that added measure of security so that then you can get it enabled for your account.
yeah. And I think this is really a good thing just to start noticing because we're always looking at small business trends and how do you get your customers to trust you and things like that. And so seeing that this is coming down the pipeline, it starts obviously at the top and then more and more customers expect like my data is going to be secure, these kinds of things. So getting into the practice, it sounds like of doing it yourself is going to just set you up better for what could be something that is really common for everyone to have, and it's built into other systems too, even for small businesses.
Absolutely.
Okay, we've all been here. You turn on your Chrome, you look in the little corner, update for Chrome, update system updates. They are crucial, we know it, but they can often get overlooked. It's just like you said, Joe, I'll do it next time. I'll be right back on here later tonight. How often should businesses, one, check for updates, and are there ways to make this process easier?
Yes. Especially if your business is running like servers for anything, you should absolutely have those updates set for automatic. And I said servers, but even your client workstation is important because the big companies like Apple and Microsoft or Linux, if you're using Linux operating systems, they are fully staffed with organizations that are when they become aware that there is a vulnerability in their software that they are developing patches for them. And depending on the level of criticality of that particular vulnerability that they found, those patches come out with different risk ratings. So, I'm just going to use basic terms of high, medium, and low. So maybe there's a low that maybe you could save for your monthly updates that you just push to all of your servers or you apply to all your servers and your workstations. But maybe you get a high. High means that the risk is very large, that if this vulnerability is exposed on your system, things could really go south very fast. So those are things that you want to be very diligent about. So if you don't have automatic setups will see that high come through. It will apply it to your servers and you'll get a notification that a restart is required or it has been completed. Otherwise, you would need to go to your server or go to your client machine, your Windows or your Apple, and you should just check for updates on a weekly basis. If you and just double check to make sure that there are no known vulnerabilities or patches that need to be deployed to your machine, because that's what happens. So if someone tries to get malware into your device or tries to expose something into your on your server, if you're on top of your patches, that is one additional level of security for you, because if that particular malware, that ransomware might actually just be trying to expose a vulnerability known within your system's operating system. And so if you've already patched against it, that's one protection measure against that vulnerability actually being able to be exploited by you clicking on that link. Number one is don't click the link. But you should have antivirus. You should be making sure that your patches are up to date. So like create yourself a checklist. If you have servers, if you have laptops that you and your team members are doing, that needs to be a checklist that you're going through on a recurring basis, weekly, monthly, and just making sure that there are no pending updates to be deployed. And if that auto download updates is not checked, please check that. That will help ease your mind and know that when those critical, we call them 0 day, some patches, when they get released, they are called 0 day, meaning when you get it, install it because there is a threat that could be immediately exposed due to the nature of that particular vulnerability that's been identified.
Okay, so it sounds like when we are seeing those things, just do it immediately or build it into your maintenance routine that you have for your business. If you're checking your financials, check your updates, make sure you're staying in on that. And you're just like, all of these tips, I feel like are really building up your digital security toolbox. Like, you don't need to have everything, but if you have a lot of these things, you're like slowly securing yourself.
I
Okay.
like the digital security posture is where I thought if I would have tried to complete your sentence, I was going to say improving your digital security posture, right? To make sure that where are you in your maturity level of your cybersecurity program, so to speak. Some of you all, or some of the small businesses here on this call, you might be in the position to where you're able to subscribe like to a managed IT services. And so that'll be critically important that, it's not just that they can, put things together and make things flash and put these fancy workflows in place, but can they also speak to their security practices? How mindful are they of security? So it's not just to wow you with all the things as they can program the computer and the systems to do, but where are they on their mindfulness of security? Because then they should be assisting you in that and making sure that these checks and balances are in place, that you do have proper antivirus, anti-malware, that you have regular routines for your backups, or you have regular monitoring for your patches that need to get applied. So for those of you that are ready to hire a managed IT services company, those should definitely be some things that you should add to your interview checklist when you are ready to bring someone in, is to get more details or information on their security practices. What are their security certifications that they can speak to, that they have to show that they really do know what you're getting ready to hire them to do to make sure that you're protecting yourself and your customers' data.
Yes, I love that. Like prepares you to make sure you're bringing the right person on to help you keep your data, your systems safe. And speaking of employees, so how can business owners effectively foster a culture of cybersecurity awareness among their employees? Are there practical ways to help them recognize these different scams?
Absolutely. I'm going to go with another bad joke. Sorry. Um, One thing I used to do in one of my previous companies in my IT shop, we had a policy. Like if you needed to step away from your computer, that you Control Alt Delete, you lock it before you walk away. You should not leave your systems open and unlocked that anyone can come in and interact on your computer, impersonating you or do anything. So, of course, a bad joke that I had when I was trying to encourage this was if I saw your workstation unlocked, I would go and send a note to the team calling that person out for having left their workspace unlocked. And then I'd lock their workstation and walk away. And of course, then we would chat about it during our team meetings, and we would then remind each other of how important that is, that we are locking that workstation. That's one door that we can control, that you as an individual can control to make sure that no one's logging into you to the system it is that you're logged in as and conducting business that way. Um, uh, but creating a culture of cybersecurity, it starts with regular engaging training sessions that don't just teach but simulate real world phishing scenarios. That's definitely one. You can provide your teams with examples of phishing emails and talk through them, like we were just sharing before about grammar and maybe the logos are bad, or, you can look at the URL, talk through those things and come up with ways of how you will share that information. Like if you did get an email, then how do you let others in your organization know that, hey, this is what I just got, be on the lookout for it. That's a nice reminder of the importance of staying on top of that as well. Um, Reinforcing those on some type of maybe if you're having a quarterly team meeting, maybe you dedicate, 10 minutes on your agenda to talk about cybersecurity and what you as an organization are doing to help make sure that everything is secure. But then what can you do to make sure that you all are leveraging your access to your systems securely? One thing that some businesses that I've worked for, tools of this that we've implemented is a tool. It's called Know Before. And so Know Before, spelled BE4, the number four. They have different training scenarios that you can sign your team members up for. And then on a recurring basis, they get an email that invites them to complete a training. And those training, it walks them through different scenarios about phishing, smishing, things to avoid for things that could lead to malware, things of that nature taking place. It can walk them through examples of how to create secure passwords. That is a good resource to consider leveraging for increasing your cybersecurity posture or maturity level. I'm going to come up with a way to coin that.
Yes, it's gonna be trademarked. I love it.
Yep.
Okay, that's awesome. And Emma dropped that in the chat in case you're wanting to look around and see what kind of resources are there. So Joe, my last formal question before we jump into the Q&A is what are some essential cybersecurity tools small business owners should consider? And are there any budget-friendly or free resources you would recommend?
Wow. So before we go budget friendly, I'll definitely just repeat, like, especially if you're a small business, if you are at the point where you're needing to leverage technology and you can partner with a managed IT services provider, that will absolutely be very important because they will then take on the accountabilities for that cost of making sure that your cyber posture is in place. So, your certificates, your servers being maintained, that you have antivirus and things of that nature. So that is definitely one thing, but that is not always budget friendly. At a minimum, small businesses should consider using firewalls. There are software-based firewalls. There are appliance-based firewalls, depending on how your business is architected with its access to your technologies. Making sure that you have antivirus. Antivirus almost comes free out of the box when you buy a new laptop, or at least it's free for the first 12 months. But you can absolutely look at things of that nature. Budget-friendly options, maybe platforms like Avast or Bitdefender. They both offer free antivirus solutions. May not have all the additional, bells and whistles that some of the paid do, but at least the basics could be covered by just looking at an Avast or Bitdefender. Um, we talked about password protection. So LastPass does provide a basic password management service. So that's, not a lot of the big box solutions. They do offer some entry level, maybe even things that are targeted for small businesses. Sometimes you don't know because you just didn't ask. And then some of them, they do advertise it right up front that, hey, you can do this, but of course you may get advertisements for upgrading to the paid, but at least you do have your basics covered. Also, the Federal Trade Commission and the Small Business Administration, they have free cybersecurity resources and guidelines available on their websites. So like if it's not actually the tool itself, then maybe they will also have, you'll see that they list resources that could be available to you at low to no cost as well.
Awesome. Oh, thank you, Emma. Emma just dropped all of those different resources in the chat. So if you want to check them out, and it's really good to hear that there are places that you can get maybe a free version of something until you can upgrade so that you don't feel like you can't have anything. Okay, so I want to jump into our Q&A because we have just a few minutes left, and I feel like this is one of those topics we could take 3 hours, probably more, to get our posture fully formed. But okay, the first question was from our earlier conversation about phishing. And this person asks, are there any ways to limit who can email us? Like, can you set up only approved emails? Is that an option? Or no?
So that's a tough one. I guess it really does depend on your line of business. Because there are some solutions with your email provider to where you can set up effectively a white list or an allow list. But that means that only those that are coming from domains or specific domains would be allowed to email in. So that's very restrictive. So, if you're expecting an email from anyone with a gmail.com, maybe gmail.com is not a good example because that's likely one that a bad email address. But if you're only maybe you do have a use case to where you have an email set up, but you only want to interact with mybank.com. And so maybe mybank.com is the only email that can come into your inbox. There are some options for you to do something like that. It is not very practical. So unfortunately, that's not necessarily going to be a workable solution for you. I know back in the day, I had a comic pasted up on one of my walls, and it was a picture of the only safe computer in the entire operations, and it was a computer that was unplugged. And so, seemingly, your email, the only safe email, is an unconnected email address. And so, if that's the case, then you will likely be limiting yourself to getting emails from potential real, like valid potential customers.
Yeah, that makes sense. So it's probably not a practical solution. So taking the time to build up those other skills is more helpful than saying like, okay, I'm only gonna let Brittany email me or something like that. Okay. Our next question, it says, my company deals with a lot of PP or PII that belongs to our customers' clients. So we're a third party service provider. They have things like socials, birth dates, addresses. Our typical practice is to view this info only on our client systems, which are often softwares like a Salesforce. But sometimes that also includes things like Box, Dropbox, or Google Drive. How do we protect ourselves from potentially being the source of a data leak?
Wow. That is a very good example. And of course, as the IT leader, my eyebrows are raising and I'm like, stomachs are doing a little bit of flips because really that is the scary part. So PII, for those that don't know, that stands for personal identifiable information. So it's not just your social security alone. Your social security number alone isn't really the problem. It's when I can see your social security number with your name and with your address. It's the combination of those things that makes it, that's where the real, I guess, issue then plays is because it's a collection of that data that then someone can use to steal your identity. Um, Then from the concern of what you just mentioned in that question, it's okay, I may have my data nice and secure in the Salesforce environment, but now I'm hearing that you want to take it out of Salesforce, maybe move it over to box.com and maybe then move it to another system. And then it's, well, how are you managing the security of the transmissions of all of those? And so really the question should come is are those movements necessary? And it's the data that's going to those other storage places, is it needed? So do you need all of that data when you're putting it in box.com? So I think that really will cause you, for me, looking in at that, I know it's just an example that you were speaking to. I would need to get in and get more detail because I'm sure there is another option and a much more secure way for you to interact with your third parties that does not have their data as compromised or vulnerable as it sounds. That's what happens when you're moving it from one system to the next. And that's definitely something it is that you do want to spend some time exploring, because if that is the basis of your business is handling data for your vendor, so it's not necessarily your customers, but you're the third party vendor, that is I mean, that's your bread and butter, is you need to be actually selling the security. You need to be able to sell the fact that you have solid controls in place that assures your vendor or your client that you are handling their data securely. Um, yeah, I'm very curious to know a little bit more about your operations so that then we could possibly explore that a bit more. But there are ways, I'm sure, for you to be able to do that without the risks that I'm hearing in the data movements between those different systems.
Yeah, that is a really good mindset, it sounds like, to get into, like you said, protecting things at rest and in motion and what motions are necessary. So we are already out of time. We're actually a little over time. Once again, I feel like this topic is something that we could talk about it for hours. I think the takeaway today is everyone go turn on two-factor authentication and no repeat passwords and lots of other things, but those are my to-do list. So thank you so much, Joe, for your expertise and your time. Thank you to all of our business owners who are on the call. We know you're busy, and we really hope that this was helpful in making sure you move into a more digitally secure future for your business. All right. Till next time, everyone. We'll see you in the next one. Bye.
You